That was weird. All right. My name is Charlie Minato. I'm going to have to fix something in a second. But I am from halfwheel.com. I am joined by Brooks Whittington. He is actually literally to my right. Do you want to say hi, Brooks? Or?
Hello.
And we have Patrick Lagreid out in Phoenix, Arizona. Brooks, you can't see it on camera, but he just ashed all over his crotch.
And the microphone.
We are here for, well, we probably... No, we actually are with audio, it looks like. We are here for the Packaging Top 10 of 2021. This is not our Top 25 list. So if you're hoping for that, you should come back tomorrow, 24 hours. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping right now to make sure that everything is working, and then we will get started. But, Patrick, do you want to tell people what you are smoking?
Yeah, so I'm actually smoking a Tatuaje Cohetes Capa Especial, the new short, or I guess relaunched Cohetes in the Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper. So enjoying it so far.
And Brooks, how about you?
I am smoking the Fuente Unnamed Reserve 2021.
And I'm smoking the U-Boat, which is apparently not a Muestra de Saca. There's no way that's going to focus. Oh, there it goes. But from Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust, which I believe is an exclusive for Rocky's Cigars. I don't know. I hadn't smoked it, and Steve Sock asked me what I thought, so here we are. Like I mentioned, this is the Packaging Top 10. Let's see if we can get that back up on the screen without a complete failure this time. Yeah, apparently not. All right. This is the Packaging Top 10, and we're going to try to see if we can get it on the screen again. Wouldn't be this show without some sort of technical issue.
I need to try the Cojete, Patrick. How was it?
So far so good. It's a little, I know it's a different blend, and because I keep thinking about the T110, it's surprisingly punchy, which I'm not surprised by Tatuaje, but it has a real nice balance of kind of a nutty creaminess and some pretty punchy black pepper. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's a stronger blend given the size, like, you know, it was blended to be particularly potent given the smaller Vitola, but so far so good. So
it'd be harder to be stronger than T110.
It's very true. How's your cigar? I don't think I've smoked that in a while.
It is decent.
Good.
So far.
So yeah, so welcome to the Packaging Awards as usual. There's a little technical hiccup. How many years have we been doing this, Brooks?
You know, I'm going to go ahead and say
A little bit.
a while.
Yeah. But in the meantime, hello, Joe. Hello, Alejo. I see some comments checking in.
We got like, what, 6 people watching?
Oh, probably. Does that count us?
That I was counting us, yes.
Okay. So at least 5. I mean, you, me, Charlie, Joe, and Alejo. All's
Assuming
well
they're
with you
still there.
guys.
Man, this is terrible.
Joe, how's the kid?
Mitch Smith, yo, what's going on?
So cute from the pictures on Facebook, dude.
Live streaming at its finest.
All right. I think that I've managed to get StreamYard to... Oh, of course there's a notification now, because why not?
Mark, Tom, hey, how you guys doing? Good to see you both. Welcome aboard.
All right. No,
Maybe.
that's not going to work either. This is just...
It all works so well in the walkthroughs, you know?
Did it? Did it work
It worked
well?
better than
It worked better than
this,
this.
you know?
No, this particular issue actually is something that...
Joe, what kind of dog did you get? I was thinking about getting a dog, but then I realized I'd have to actually be the one taking care of it, and I decided not to.
Terrible idea.
I've already got a
A
turtle and a cat
Look
and a
at
child.
that.
And a child. Tortoise, excuse me, a tortoise. Big difference.
And you have a cigar blog. All right, let's get started. So, like I said, this is the Packaging Awards, finally. And, Patrick, do you want to kind of go over and explain how this works? Or how we do this?
The Packaging Awards are actually a carryover from Brooks's former website, which is called Smoking Stogie. And really, it's our way of recognizing the work done by the marketing and creative teams of cigar companies, whose work is really often as much the reason as to why someone tries a cigar as the one behind it or the company behind it. So we know a lot of work goes into it. We know it's very labor intensive, and getting a product to come to life is a challenge. And so we want to recognize the people that do it well. So as far as what gets onto the list and how it gets onto the list, there's a few little rules that we have. This year, product and design must first ship to stores in 2021. That's the first thing. Packaging items created by retailers are allowed. That's a bit of a change, or at least a little more of a clarification from years past. Products are evaluated by what ships in the box, and that means that accompanying accessories that ship in other boxes are not considered. That may come into play as you see the list. At least one of the half-wheel staff must see the product in person. And the reason for that is that we want to verify not just design, but actual quality. We've had years past where there's been things that have placed very highly because they're designed, but maybe they weren't built as sturdy as one would want, or there were some problems that might affect things in transit. And really, we want to reward not just design, but physical execution as well. Each member of the half-wheel staff can nominate items. There is no limit to the number of items that an individual can nominate or that can be nominated collectively. You're not obligated to nominate any products, but amongst Brooks, Charlie, myself, and Brian Burt, we each put some products on the list every year. And staff members are asked to rank those nominations from best to worst. That gives us sort of a rough guide. And then in the case of a tiebreaker, we have a process for that, which I will allow Charlie to go into further detail about, just to explain how that works. I'm assuming he's maybe ready. Charlie?
Yeah, so we, like Patrick mentioned, we just nominate things. We rank them 1 to, this year it was 22. And this year, when we tabulate that out, we literally, so you can see like there's a product A right there. Brian ranked it 17th out of his 22, not out of the 22 things he was asked to rank. Brooks, that same product, ironically, or oddly, had it as his third place. And as you can see, neither Patrick nor I were very much on Brooks's there. But as you can see, it added up to 47 points. It's a very simple way of tabulating it. We just literally lowest points total and then just rank them. This was actually a legitimate tie. So we had a 3-way tie for 10th place. And what I ended up doing here, because we were then we had a 3-way tie, that meant there was 12 sort of finalists. We then just simplified the rankings. So I took out all the stuff that wouldn't qualify and then re-ranked them based off how people voted, and that ended up breaking the tie. So there's that. I don't think anyone probably cares about it, but it is half-wheel. And if anything, I mentioned this throughout some of the other award shows that we do and have done in the past, that the more disclosure about how these awards are created, the better. And so we spent some time dealing with that nonsense.
Indeed.
With
and
that
one
said,
thing I do want to touch on, just going back to what all includes packaging, that is bands, boxes. Again, it doesn't include things like accessories or related products, but just so you understand what goes into us voting on things. There's also not necessarily a unified standard. We all have different things that we tend to prioritize. And I think as we reveal our list this year, you'll get to know what those are and a little bit about each of us in terms of what we'd like to see in packaging and what tends to score well for us collectively, but also individually.
All right. So with that said, number 10, hopefully is going to load. And it is the Hoyo de Monterrey Primaveras. I don't know why that image decided to immediately go off the screen. Let's see if we can get it back on there. It is was created, as you can see on the box there, for the year of the ox. This is Habanos Eseada's second Zodiac series. The Zodiac series, or Zodiac calendar series, is made very popular by Davidoff, who's now done over 10 of them, or more than 10 of them. This is the second one that Habanos Eseada has done. This was the 2021 version. They've not announced a year of the Tiger, which would be 2022. I mean, I guess there's the Cohiba Cigarillos or whatever, but that's not really what we're talking about here. I would suspect that they probably will, given how well these presumably have sold and how much money they were charging for them. For those that are unfamiliar, this was a Churchill-ish sized cigar. Looks like that. That was priced at, I mean, the cheapest we could find it was a little more than 50 euros per cigar. This is a box that ends up on here not because it's some sort of innovative feature Latin thing. There's no secret doors or anything like that. It's a wood box with high gloss lacquer. But I think this is really just encompasses what Habano Sociedad gets right almost all of the time with their packaging. They just, you look at this and go, I don't know how they could really improve upon making a high gloss wooden box with this theme for Hoyo de Monterrey. What I was particularly impressed by was this secondary logo. It's quite modern. Hoyo de Monterrey is probably my favorite, main band design as far as that top white band with the red and gold. It's very classic and sort of, I love the way that it looks like it's got pinstriping on the sides of it. And, anytime you want to pair that band with something else, you potentially can go wrong. But for me, they went the complete opposite end. They made a really modern band, secondary band with red and gold, which are two colors that are important in Chinese culture. I think they did a fantastic job on here. Brooks, was there anything about this packaging you shot in the studio, between the boxes and the bands that you felt like could have been done better?
I'm sure there's always something, but in terms of
holographic.
What?
Could have been holographic.
Could have been. When I photographed it, I was very impressed just from the moment I picked it up. It's an extremely solid box. It's extremely well made. You can tell the minute that you touch it. It's just the whole package is very, very impressive, and that's not unusual for Habanos. But I don't see how very many non-Habanos other than Davidoff, somebody with a whole bunch of money can come close to it. It's really, really striking when you see it. Perhaps more striking in its simplicity than in anything complex or that anything in that regard. It's a very cool box, very nice box, and it's definitely worthy of placing on the list.
Yeah, and one of the other things I'm curious about, the last time we were in Cuba together, you went and visited was it a humidor factory or
it was a
box?
Well, they don't really
humidor
have factories.
Well,
there.
but
they
like
have
a
guy who makes
production center.
Correct. Yeah. They were doing at the time. They were doing the interesting. I got to be honest with you. I don't remember which one. It was an interesting box that they were making at the time, and all these things are done by basically by hand. At least the ones that I saw. And I mean, it's obvious when you look at it that and when you feel it that it's a well-made product, and it's something that people are taking time with. It's not something that's just thrown together in a fit of work.
Okay. We got to move on here, but the one thing I was trying to get at, I thought it was interesting in Cuba that Habano Sociedad was starting to really talk about trying to get some of this box manufacturing back domestically.
Correct. They specifically made that very, very clear that they were trying to get people in Cuba to actually come, people and artisans in Cuba to actually come back and actually start making these
instead of making specifically for the high ends or the more complicated stuff, not just the basic stuff that they were already doing.
Correct. Instead of sending it to China.
All right.
All right, so number 9 is mine. Number 9 is the Oscar Valladares McFly, and I'll tell you something. If you see this, you'll know instantly why it made the list. The McFly, if you're older than about 20 years old, so that takes away Charlie, unfortunately. McFly is obviously a reference to the Back to the Future movie. And it looks very, very 80s in terms of how it's presented. It's a holographic, kind of a rectilinear cover, and basically it shifts as you look at it. It shifts so that you can actually see. It's very difficult to see in photographs. However, the cover will make it so that it looks like that it's coming off of the page. The second I saw it, I was thinking to myself, "Wow, this reminds me of going to the arcade back in the day." And you ever been to an arcade, Charlie?
Yeah.
You a little too young for that?
No, I was around for that. I mean, arcades are still around.
Playing Street Fighter, the original Street Fighter, and putting the quarter on the Street Fighter to say that where my place was in line. And this reminded me instantly of that. It's a very very well done. The bands are also interesting because they have a glitter effect on them. It's very 80s. It's very obvious at what they were going for, and they nailed the entire look as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, this is one that I really think still photography does absolutely zero justice to it. I remember when I got word that this project was coming out, almost as soon as, hey, we've got this new cigar coming out, was said to me, it was wait till you see the packaging in person. And sure enough, we saw it at the trade show, and it is a immediate flashback to um, like baseball cards that I used to have, or these little action things where you'd sort of see like three different looks of a baseball player or whatever it was. The graphic is just like screaming 80s graphics, and certainly McFly was a follow up to Oscar Valladares' Superfly, which had a 70s theme to it. And so with McFly now here, I'm really intrigued to see what they have on the way for maybe a 1990s themed cigar this year. Like I say, it's one of those ones I stumbled across in the store the other day and picked it up and was like, yeah, they certainly nailed this one. And this is just where bringing the concept of a cigar to life does really well. And even though the packaging isn't as substantial as something like the Year of the Ox, uh, it definitely catches your eye and just activates and calls to mind so many things about what this cigar is drawing on from its references. So, congratulations to the team at Oscar Valladares on McFly, number 9 on our packaging list this year. So, moving on, that takes us to number 8, and this gets us to a cigar that has been one of my favorite series since it debuted. It's the 3rd installment in Espinosa's Las Seis Provincias line. This is a Las Villas release, and once again, the company enlisted the help of Cuban artist Aiden Gutierrez, who's now living in South Florida, for the artwork. As you may remember, Espinosa has used the Las Seis Provincias line, which honors the 6 original provinces of Cuba prior to the revolution, as its inspiration. So the first one was La Habana, then there was Matanzas, and they've used limited edition packaging as a way to bring the line to life in addition to a more traditional format. So first year you had the swinging box design. Second year you had a box that had window shutters on it. Now you have a curio style. And as you can see, there's a La Habana on the left and the Matanzas on the right. This one, they went with a curio cabinet style design, which is a little bit more of a traditional box if you look at it sort of from a architectural standpoint. There is the stained glass window treatment at the top. But what really gets me and has gotten me ever since I got introduced to his work is the art of Aiden Gutierrez. Now, Las Villas was known in the 18th century as being a cattle hub of Cuba. It then shifted to sugar production, and that's what's captured here. So on the front of the box, you have these doors with a little teeny window that give you a little look out to the landscape. And then as you open the lid, you get a much more complete view of the landscape. And not only the landscape, but the changes that Las Villas went through in its industrial development. So again, there's a great look at it, cattle to sugar to a more industrial operation. The coffins inside are new this year, and this one struck me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I love cigar packaging that incorporates art. And as I mentioned, I liked Aiden Gutierrez's stuff since I first seen it, including the Warzone release that he was involved with. And this is just another example of the kind of work that he does. It's also something that, for me, if this doesn't end up on a shelf after you've smoked the cigars, you're really, I think, missing the point. I mean, this is something that should be displayed. It's as much art as it is a functional cigar box. And also, prior to previous years, this is probably the most durable of the releases. Something that we've maybe criticized Espinosa for in the past, but this one definitely steps up in that regard. Charlie, you want to talk about your thoughts on this?
I mean, my main thought was the last point, which is that, on one hand, I was a bit disappointed. I don't think it's, I mean, I guess it's a secret to our audience, but Patrick is the one that really loves the packaging. I think that certainly my design aesthetic is probably more towards more modern looking stuff than this inherently. And I'm also a lot more interested in the sort of, I would say, the construction of boxes, maybe more than the aesthetics of them. But the first two were fascinating. I mean, the first one in particular was like, man, you've thought of, the box itself is whatever. It's a shoebox essentially with a lid on top. But the swinging nature of it was just crazy, adding an extra dimension, adding movement to what's otherwise a static display. It was one of the most flimsy things a cigar has ever been shipped in, at least in the time that we've been writing about cigars. The second one was super intricate in the way the doors opened up, the top piece. You can't tell in this picture, but that bottom, that blue piece there, that actually folds out from the box, so there's just a lot of movement to open it up. That being said, we took that the second release out of its box to shoot a picture of against the new one with, and it there was a piece that fell off of it because of how fragile it is. They've solved the fragility aspect for the third release, but I was a little bit disappointed the doors don't open up. There are two doors on that front piece. I guess I can pull that back up on the screen. And given how much the level of detail and the intricacy that the first two had, I kind of would have expected it to open up. But I think they prioritized getting these cigars safely to people. And in that regard, I think they did really well, with one caveat. If you have bought this or are going to buy it, the box that we had, the coffins reeked of paint. So we actually took the cigars out of the coffins, put the coffins back in the box, and displayed the box, like you mentioned it should be, Patrick. Any other thoughts?
No, like I said, I really have loved this series, and they're halfway through it, so 3 down, 3 to go. I'm just really intrigued to see what they come up with for the remaining 3 releases. And certainly, this was probably the biggest acknowledgement of detail versus durability and the challenge that exists in that. But again, I think as everyone who's ever designed something would say, you try something, it works, you realize it doesn't work, and you come back at it with a different approach. And now they have a track record, and it'll be interesting to see what they come up with next. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, one thing I hadn't considered, and then we'll get on to number 7, is I wonder how much, with all this stuff, I mean, I think that this series, which is the first 2 releases have made it, the Cohiba Spectre, the first 2 Cohiba Spectres made it onto this list. It's interesting there was none of those in 2020, and I'm also curious to know, in the case of this one in particular, whether or not COVID played a role into what Espinosa could do or what the designers could do with it. We've heard about COVID delays with everything, but in the cigar industry, I don't think there's been, in terms of has the tobacco been affected by COVID? Yes, but not as much. It's not getting infected, hopefully, by COVID. But that supply chain's been affected. But where we've really heard about the supply chain being affected by COVID is with packaging. And I have to imagine that with these super intricate designs, that probably explains why some of them weren't here in 2020, and also maybe why some choices were made for 2021. So, Brooks, let's go ahead and get on to number 7.
Yes. So, number 7 is the JR Cigar 50th Sampler. Now, this was a sampler that was released for JR Cigar, a Burlington, North Carolina-based retailer.
Sort of. Maybe not in Burlington. Their headquarters is technically in New Jersey, but that's some legal complication.
Right.
Their big warehouse is in Burlington.
They have a lot of different places where they have stuff coming out of.
They do, but I think legally speaking, the IRS would like you to know they're not based in Burlington.
So this was released for their 50th anniversary, and it's full of 12 cigars. All 12 cigars were exclusive releases for JR Cigar. They were released throughout the year last year, and they were all put into each of them was put into the sampler. And now this is a very interesting sampler. When Charlie told me, he was like, "Have you seen this thing?" When it was back in the studio, and I was like, "I hadn't photographed it yet." And I was like, "No, it just looks like a sampler." But it's quite a bit more than that. When you actually look at it, it has a opening. It has a symbol on the front that is essentially looks like a little Iron Man logo here, and it's essentially a huge piece of metal, solid piece of metal. And what happens is this piece on the front actually attaches magnetically and keeps those 3 leaves together, as you can see there. And as you open that up, as you open up the 3 leaves, you realize that it's just this huge sampler. That's it's a massive product. You have all of the 12 cigars in there, and then you have the lighter that's on the right. So it includes a lighter as well as a Boveda, and the cool thing is that if you actually turn this little piece around, it's actually a cigar stand, cigar holder, that you can actually use that as a to hold your cigar when you're smoking them. So essentially, this other than a cutter, this product has everything that you need to actually smoke the cigars that are actually inside of it. A very cool and very cool package. Very nice to be able to just give somebody a package, a sampler, and say, hey, you've got everything you need except a cutter. I'm a little surprised, honestly, a cutter wasn't included. It's got everything else, so it seems like it maybe should have. But
maybe there's a punch on the lighter.
there could be a punch on the lighter, sure. I guess I didn't check that, but possibly. Regardless, it's a really great, perfect gift to give somebody who's a cigar, doesn't necessarily smoke a whole bunch of cigars, but wants to try different things. It'd be great for it. MSRP $250, and just a really nice gift idea.
Yeah, when I saw this, I looked at it and I went, okay, it's a sampler, and it's a neat way that JR is giving people the opportunity to smoke one of each of the blends that were released for the 50th anniversary, in which I think we all have to acknowledge a 50-year anniversary is something certainly worth celebrating. I didn't realize the substantial nature of that piece that you have in your hand there, Brooks. Being from the Southwest, now I sort of looked at it and went, wow, that's a heck of a belt buckle they're giving you. But then when you realize it is a cigar stand, it just does add to the overall value and impression of the packaging.
And it's solid. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It's a solid piece, but the magnet underneath is also. I mean, it's very, very. It's not coming off very easily, which I was also impressed with. It's not something that it'll come off if you kind of it won't come off. It's stuck on there. So it's a well designed piece in that regard as well.
Yeah, and certainly I think we've seen companies give a lot more attention to samplers lately, beyond just putting them in the grab and go humidified pouches, which are great for a lot of functions. This is a way to really put a nice bow on a 50th year anniversary for JR Cigar and give consumers a way to sample the cigars that were released for that celebration, which, again, there's 12 of them in there, if I'm not mistaken, and that's a significant undertaking in and of itself. So, really kudos to JR for putting a nice bow on the celebration of the 50th anniversary.
Indeed.
All right, so that takes us to number 6. And it is, speaking of COVID, it is a product that I guess maybe wasn't really delayed due to COVID because it's Habanos. But this was introduced in 2020 or shown off in 2020. It is the Romeo y Julieta Linea de Oro. It is translates to gold line or golden line, depending on how poor my Spanish is these days. It was introduced at the 145th anniversary celebration of Romeo y Julieta in Havana. Brooks and I were there at the Festival del Habano in 2020, the most recent one to take place. And this ended up shipping somewhat kind of not quietly, but a little bit surprising. I definitely didn't have it on my things that I would like to, or thought would end up heading to stores in December of 2021. But it is what it is, and glad the cigars are finally heading to stores. It's a new sub-brand underneath Romeo y Julieta, and it is it's very pretty. Amongst sort of this list is a lot of limited edition stuff. This is a regular production line. I don't know if it's going to be regularly available to get because of Cuban cigar shortages, but it's awesome looking in person. Pictures on this one are really tough, particularly with the bands of the cigars. Brian Burt was doing the write-up for the published article that we'll put up after we finish this live show, and he asked me, he was like, the bands kind of look a little rose gold depending on the picture. Are they rose gold or gold? And they're actually really light. They're almost like a hay-colored gold. And what that means is depending on what they're around, they take on a little bit of that hue. So in those dark red boxes where you kind of get you can see the wood grain through them, they do look a little bit more rose gold than they do if you just put them by themselves on a neutral background. And it's super impressive. You can see on there just all of the detail work. On the top of the main band, you can see it says Linea de Oro, and on the sides of the secondary band, there's a whole bunch of artwork that I believe is basically made to point out it's the 145th anniversary. Unique in the sense that the names of the tools are actually printed on the bands, which is not something you see every day. And I think similar to the Hoyo de Monterrey Primaveras that was at number 10, this to me just kind of encapsulates Habanos, with maybe the exception of Vigueros and Jose Pedro. When they want to do packaging, they do it really, really well. It's they have a leg up in the sense that they're dealing with a lot of legacy brands that have rich histories and great imagery, but this is, more or less entirely new packaging, and I think they absolutely nailed it. Brooks You saw the packaging. You saw the. I mean, do you remember part of that night? Or,
Indeed. Well, I remember some of that night, but this is one of those things that, as you said, the photographs don't really give them do them justice, and I'm not sure I would have put it as high on my list if I hadn't seen them in person. They're really classical looking. It's really, really nicely done. And what I was really impressed with was the bands, and the logo on the bands was such a interesting take on the classic Romeo and Julieta logo. It's really well done. It's very obvious that it's a high quality piece, and it's a gorgeous. They're gorgeous in person. I can say that.
And one last thing before we get to number 5. It appears, I'm not 100% sure because we haven't purchased a box yet because Cuban cigar shortage. But it appears that they are shipping with a similar packaging to what we saw. Not the boxes are the boxes, but they gave out sort of presentation samplers at the event, and they came in these boxes with this nice, like really bright red felt cover. It looks like that's probably happening with the regular box. I'm not 100% sure. But if that is, what that also means for you, if you do buy a box of these, is when you get the box and you open it up at home, it really does feel like a luxury item because it's presented and packaged in a way that's a little bit nicer than your typical cigar box. So with that, you want to get to number 5, Brooks?
Yes, number 5 is the second sampler on our list, and that is the Smoke Inn Advent Calendar sampler. And Advent calendars have become apparently this year at least last year they became quite the thing. Smoke Inn released one, and Oliva released one as well. Tatuaje actually announced one, but did not ship it. It'll ship with the 2022 version, if I recall.
It's supposed to ship sometime this year,
right?
Yes.
This year. And this is another one of those things. When I hear sampler, a lot of times sampler get kind of a bad rap, because, in my mind at least, because you just throw some things in a box and bam, you've got yourself a sampler. This is not that at all. This is a very impressive piece, and when I saw it for the first time, it's obviously a very solid piece of workmanship. But when I felt it, when I picked it up for the first time, I thought it was wood, made of wood, and it's not. It's cardboard, but it's very, very impressive. When you pick it up, it's solid, it's heavy, and when you open it up, the two doors open up, and you have the numbered slots there in going down the way there.
Sorry.
And the slots open up, and you can actually pull out the cigars, each one of them individually, and they are all the cigars are padded, have padded inserts there for them. And another super impressive thing, this actually is capable of having a humidification device inside of it, in the back of it. And so you don't actually have to put this in a humidor. You can actually leave it out for the 25 days that you have that sampler package around. And it's very super impressive. Just the little things about it as well. Something like the tabs. If you can see on this photograph, the tabs that you have to pull down in order to open up that drawer, they actually stay attached to the bottom of wherever the tabs are attached. And so you can reuse this thing over and over again. They're not coming off. They're not it does not tear off, or it's a thick piece of paper, and it's just very, very impressive. Smoke Inn deserves a lot of credit for this, if presuming they designed it or hired somebody to design it. It's very, very nice. As far as I'm concerned, it's essentially one of the nicest samplers I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. So I got a notification that Smoke Inn was sending us something, which was a bit odd because we hadn't purchased anything from them. And then the morning that it was supposed to be delivered, I got a press release with announcing this product. And I was like, oh, it looks interesting. It looks like it's another Advent calendar sampler thing. And I showed up at the office, and it got delivered. And I picked up this gigantic box that it shipped in and was like, oh, this is super heavy. and just assumed that it was not the smoke-in sampler, because why would a cardboard box weigh like 9 pounds? And then I opened it up and I was like, holy crap, this was a serious investment in, design acumen. It is, not the most interesting looking box from the outside, but I think if you purchase this or you're at a smoke-in store and you get to see it, and particularly if you just pick it up once, you will be like, oh, this is a lot different. I don't know if it can support 150 pounds worth of weight standing on top of it, but I'd give it a better shot than pretty much any other cardboard box I've ever seen. It's super stout. Abe at Smoke-In tells me that the 2022 version, which they are planning on doing, is going to be even crazier than this. So I am really looking forward to that. One quick clarification. Brooks said that it's capable of being humidified. It actually is humidified. It has it's not a Bovida pack. It's the Lotus Humidif Group type humidity packs on the back of it. And as Brooks mentioned, the real advantage there is if you don't have a cabinet humidor or gigantic humidor that could fit this very, very large box, it allows you to then do the advent calendar thing where you open up one on each day without having to worry about the cigars going dry. And it's super impressive. I suspect if you read our 10 questions or my 10 questions editorial for 2022, one of the predictions on there is about how many advent calendars we're going to have. I suspect in an industry that loves copycat stuff that we'll have at least a half a dozen that will ship this year. There are two people that have asked a question. I'm going to quickly fill in, and then I'm going to turn this over to Patrick for number 4. People want to know what the top or the 6 through 10 picks have been. So number 10 was the Hoyo de Monterrey Primaveros from Habanos Aseada. Number 9 was the Oscar Valladares McFly from Oscar Valladares. Number 8 was Espinosa's Las Seis Provincias, the latest, the 2021 version. Number 7 was the JR Cigar 50th sampler. Number 6 was Habanos Aseada's Romeo y Julieta Linea de Oro. And number 5 was the Smoke-In Advent Calendar 2021 edition. And with that, Patrick, do you want to do number 4?
Absolutely. Number 4, you'd say the words Arturo Fuente, OpusX, and Ellie Blue, and immediately something impressive comes to mind, and that is the case here with the OpusX 25th release. This is a humidor release. We want to be clear, this is one that we mentioned or alluded to in the notes about what makes it on the list. There's actually been 2 packaging formats announced for this. Charlie will touch on the other one in a bit, but to our knowledge, it has not been released, and we haven't even seen actual photographs of it. So this is based solely on the humidor and the cigar packaging. You can also notice there's some accessories to the side. As we mentioned in the notes, those do not factor into it. What this is, though, is a very well done LED humidor incorporating a green and black and orange color scheme for the OpusX 25th anniversary. And OpusX really needs no introduction if you're a cigar fan. It's Fuente's flagship product. It's their Halo product, and this got the treatment that a 25th anniversary release is deserving of. I know, Charlie, you've seen this in person more than I have, and can touch on some of the detail and things like that, but really this is bringing the Fuente design aesthetic to an incredibly well-made humidor, at least from everything I've seen about it, and giving a monumental anniversary release about as proper of a treatment as you can give it.
And it was 1 year late in true cigar industry fashion. So, it is what it is. I when I first saw this before the PCA convention and trade show opened, which is where these pictures were taken, I was like, oh, of course that's going to work. This is not necessarily my favorite. I don't hate this shade of green, but this wouldn't be the first color I would pick to make a cigar box with, or a cigar band. Or humidor, or whatever you want to call it. But as it turns out, the OpusX band is so good that I'm pretty convinced you could do whatever you wanted and it would look as awesome as it does there. They really killed the bands. The humidor is not my style, but it's an LE Blue humidor. If you own an LE Blue humidor, if you've gotten to see one in person and pick one up and play around with it, there's a reason why they cost as much as they do. And, part of it is, it's a luxury item, but part of it's also that they tend to make really good humidors. And this is no exception to that. As Patrick mentioned, there was another humidor. It is, as you can see, almost it's $70,000 retail price. It comes with cigars. This one came with 25 cigars, if I'm not mistaken. The one that we saw. This one comes with more cigars. This is not something that we voted on because none of us have seen it in person, and To my knowledge, there's no pictures of it. I don't even know, quite frankly, if they finished making the first one. But this was, I mean, this thing looks absolutely ridiculous. And there also were, Patrick, I don't think you mentioned, but there was an ashtray, a lighter, cutter. Maybe you did. I'm not paying attention apparently. That went along with this. That if you're really into OpusX, look great. If you're not into OpusX, they might look a little gaudy. I think it's you can't fault it. That being said, this is also I think far and away the most expensive thing. I think it's like 8 times more expensive than anything else on the, not the $70,000 one, but the humidor that we voted on is even crazier. One thing I still have not been able to get from Fuente is whether or not they plan on selling the OpusX 25th cigars outside of the humidors in any capacity. I would suspect at some point we'll see them, but only Fuente is Fuente, so who knows?
There you go. So that takes us to number 3. And when you talk about bringing products to life, that's something that really resonates with me. And for the first time in its 4-year release, Davidoff did that exceptionally well with the Chef's Edition 2021. Now, you say Chef's Edition, that obviously brings to mind food and cooking and things that I am nowhere near good at or even remotely capable of achieving. And these are all Michelin-starred chefs, if I believe, or if not, they're highly regarded. And so for this year's release, instead of just doing a traditional box, Davidoff incorporated 2 design elements that are both unique and something you want to hold on to, which also scores well with myself and I think some of the other half-wheel staff. So the base of instead of a traditional box, the base is actually an ashtray, and it's a 4-slot ashtray that you see the cigars inside right there. The top is made of wood and is on one side has 2 spots for your drinks, a little spot to place your cigars or your cutter or your lighter or your remote control or whatever works for you. And I have not tested this out because I am not well versed in these things. But the top of the lid actually reminds me a bit of a cutting board, which is probably maybe the closest tie into the idea of a Chef's Edition cigar. It's definitely interesting in packaging. And Brooks, I'll let you talk about it because you've handled this more than I have. I've seen it in stores and was impressed with it. But you've actually had to sort of handle this for photographs. But when you talk about, again, bringing a product to life and giving you something that, as people have alluded to, packaging can be expensive. And you're right, you don't smoke the boxes. But if you're going to do it right, I at least like to have something that I either want to hold on to, that I do want to hold on to, either for display purposes or, in this case, something that's quite functional.
Yeah, and this is definitely the definition of functional. It's wonderful. When I picked it up for the first time, when I took it out of the box, it's very impressive when you feel it. It's just not a cheap imitation or anything of that nature. It's obvious that it was built to have this feel that it's a very luxury product, and it's very, and to me it's fairly innovative in terms of you have these cigars that fit in here perfectly. You have this both parts of this ashtray are perfectly designed to give you something to do with after the fact. And the only problem I have with it, in fact, when I was photographing and when I've been taking it out of the humidor, is that it doesn't actually latch shut. And so that top, that cover lid is actually just latches notches in there. As you can see, those notches, and the wood has notches that actually fit on top. And so it keeps it closed, but it doesn't keep it latched. And so I've had to be careful every time I take it in and out of the humidor, and I just I can just imagine myself dropping it and shattering all over the floor, which would be something that I would do probably. And it's just something that to be aware of. It's very, very well made. It's very well designed. It looks amazing. And the ashtray, although I haven't used it, I imagine it probably works pretty well as an ashtray as well. So yeah, looks great.
Yeah, I could definitely see. I mean, that ashtray looks like it belongs on, a side table at any of the Davidoff lounges that I've been to, and I could certainly see that top piece being set out in between 2 chairs, either on your patio, your smoking lounge, or wherever you like to enjoy a cigar. Again, it gives you something that extends the life of the packaging much beyond the functionality, which is a way to get the cigars to you. And yes, it does add to the cost. And I certainly acknowledge that there are products out there that that seem higher priced because of the packaging. But in this case, at least it's one that gives you some functionality to it and something you should hold on to, hopefully, and get some use out of
Yeah, I'm
long
a
after
little
the
surprised.
cigars have smoked.
I'm a little surprised that more manufacturers don't try to do something like this, where packaging is expensive. But I wonder if, this is a thing going forward, if more manufacturers may try something like this, where, listen, we're going to have the more expensive packaging, but you're going to get something that actually can be used as opposed to just throwing the box away or whatever it is. My dad uses cigar boxes for, nuts and bolts and things like that. But after that, other than that, I'm not sure what else you can use it for other than just to hold knickknacks. In a situation like this, I would pay extra for a box that I could actually have something like this to use specifically, as opposed to just having a box that I would just throw away for the most part. So
Yeah.
one more comment that I forgot and perhaps is important. There is a situation, as I mentioned, that when you pick up this box, you have to be careful because it does come open and it's not latched. However, it does come with an exterior box that it actually slides into, and so you can leave that. You can leave the box and everything inside the exterior box, and it's fine. It's not obviously as good looking, but in terms of actually being able to not have to worry about it opening up and everything like that, you can use that. We throw those boxes away, so it's not a big deal for us. But you can actually have that to do that for anybody else who orders one.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about this, I could see if you were hosting a little get together with some friends. I mean, you've got a perfect display set up for cigars. You could put a couple of bottles of spirits on the top piece, in your accessories. I mean, you could really do a lot with this. And I think the other thing I want to touch on really quickly
Chop up
as
some
well,
onions.
Sure, hey, I mean, whatever works for you. Is we've seen ashtrays incorporated in box designs before, and I think it's fair to say that it's a nice decorative piece, but there's a lot of times where I probably wouldn't use it necessarily because it may not be a true ashtray. We've seen a few that have been have been a little more substantial. This definitely, like I said, feels like it could be just as at home in a Davidoff lounge as anywhere. So
Yeah, since we're apparently just going to add some thoughts onto all this, the way that I would describe that ashtray, I agree with you, Patrick. There, Plasencia was I don't know if they were necessarily the first one, but they were the ones.
I don't see your name on this list
that
here,
really. Your name's not on it either. It's just a letter, you dumbass. Plasencia. Yeah, we're doing great here. So, Plasencia had these ashtray lids. They still, I think, with some of their products, they got rid of them. I suspect that, to Brooks's point earlier, why manufacturers don't do this is largely cost related. There's also, I could imagine the nightmare of what happens when the ashtray piece gets slightly out of alignment and then their entire cigar box production gets screwed because they're probably not being made in the same exact place since one's wood and the other one's some sort of porcelain-like material. But the thing that struck me with this is that if you didn't know any better and just saw the ashtray piece, you wouldn't immediately think it was a cigar box. The Plasencia one kind of looks a little off from a typical ashtray design, but like you mentioned, it fits in with the Davidoff sort of lounge design aesthetic. A little bit, large there. Oh, look, someone's making a Steve Saka joke. And with that...
I've never heard that before.
With the joke about Brooks looking like Steve Saka's son, although he doesn't look like at least the one son that I've met. It's debatable. All right, I'm going to remove Brooks from the screen. I'm going to remove the comment from Steve Saka's son. I'm going to remove myself. I'm going to give the floor to Patrick Lagreid.
Well, thank you. Now, as I full screen myself for a brief second, we come to the top position, and you think, well, what happened to number 2? And the answer is we have a tie for number 1. This is not the first time that we've had ties for the top spot, and I think as you'll see, the 2 products that tied for the top spot did so for a lot of similar reasons and some very distinctive reasons. And so the first one that ties for the number 1 spot is the latest in a series from Davidoff, and it is their Year of the Tiger. It's part of their Zodiac series, and this has been a series that has consistently placed well on our packaging awards. So Davidoff has put a lot of creativity and a lot of thought into this, and it got into, I don't want to say a fairly complacent place. It was always well done, but you kind of saw the evolution, and it seemed like it, maybe settled down a tick from the early days. Now with the Year of the Tiger, they have reinvigorated the line, in my opinion. And Charlie, if you can back up one slide there, I want to start with the outer box. And number 1 is you don't see a lot of clear lids in the cigar industry. I think mainly because you get the fake Cuban thought that comes to mind with clear lids, but in this case it is integral to the design of the Year of the Tiger. So of course you think of tigers, you think of tiger stripes, and that's what sort of dictates the packaging for this release. As you can see, there's some slots on there that give an allusion to either tiger stripes or, as I was looking at it, possibly a forest and a tiger coming through the trees and through the bushes. And it gives you one clear look at a central cigar, which this does not factor into the packaging, but Davidoff involved or used some fairly interesting fermentation techniques to get a tiger stripe design on the leaves. It's completely natural. And I think I'll let the other two guys talk about that if they want to. And then you get to the cigars themselves. And actually, to get in before that, you can see there's a little bar that goes across. That one's actually held in with magnets, something you don't see all the time. A lot of times it's just a piece of wood that's designed for protection during transport and potentially storage and even just pulling it in and out of your humidor. These are not cheap cigars, and you certainly don't want to risk a cracked wrapper if you can avoid it. So that helps with that. The wood is substantial. And then you get to the bands, which are the traditional Davidoff white label bands with the white and gold aesthetic. And then, as we talked about with the Hoyo de Monterrey Primaveras, you get a secondary band in the red and gold, denoting it as the year of the tiger. And then you get into the detail work, which I think is on our next slide of the lid piece. You see a gold etched tiger coming through those wood pieces. And again, small, intricate, potentially overlookable until you actually see it in person or you get to see a close-up shot. And you just realize that when it comes to activating a theme, this nailed it in our opinion. It's a lot of cigars maybe don't have a big theme behind them, and they end up in more traditional boxes, even with some artwork and decoration. And then you sort of see this step up to a higher level of execution. And for me, that's what helped the Davidoff Year of the Tiger score so highly. Charlie, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, this series has done extremely well on the packaging awards. This is, I think there are some series, the Espinosa, Las Seis Provincias, certainly one of them, where it's pretty clear the manufacturers are spending a lot of resources, not just money, but also time on the packaging. And this is, I would say the leader in the clubhouse, certainly in terms of the breadth and depth that's had, because this is, 10 or 11 of these so far, depending on how you want to look at it. This is probably, at least when the one thing I'll say about this is once the cigars leave the box, it maybe isn't as pretty because of its clear, having the ability to see into the box is a little bit different. But, when the cigars are in the box, I mean, you don't really need to explain what's happening there. You completely understand it. And even down to, you can see there with the wood grain choices where you've still got some of that striping effect. I will add here, we did not vote on this because none of us have seen this humidor. This was a Davidoff Masterpiece humidor that they did to coincide with the release. It comes with a different Vitola of Year of the Tiger cigars. If you purchase one of these, please contact us because we'd love to buy at least one of them off of you. This humidor appears to be outrageous looking. Those are two different images of tigers that are on that lid there, and I really don't want to buy a $20,000 humidor. How much that is? I mean, it's part your money. I don't want to spend that much money on a humidor. But if you had to spend that much money on a humidor and you like tigers, then this just appears to be absolutely outrageous. Bravo to Davidoff there. I remember having a conversation many years ago in Dortmund, Germany, with the person at the time who was responsible for sort of spearheading these. I don't know if necessarily the design, but more the execution of these projects for the Zodiac series, and just sort of talking about what goes into it and about how much planning they do. They'll see, design elements, and they'll be like, oh, no, we don't want to use that one for the year of the sheep or whatever. We want to use that one for the year of the ox. And I imagine that the tiger idea was something they've had in their back pocket of really trying to incorporate the tiger stripes or maybe a tiger in its cage, etc. And they've absolutely nailed it. And, once again, find themselves at the very top of this list. Although they are not alone, and we're going to turn the floor over to our esteemed colleague, who I previously called a dumbass, Brooks Whittington.
I've been called worse.
Probably today.
So the tied for the first place and probably one of the most astounding packages I've ever seen is the Cohiba Spectre 2022.
21.
It says 22 right there.
Yikes. That appears to be the 2021 version.
Okay. It says 22 right there on the list.
My bad.
The official list. 21, yes, 2021. I was just reading off the list. This is, I'll tell you something. Again, I a lot of times when I get the picture, these packages in to photograph them, I'm not the first person to see them, or sometimes I am. I was the first person to see this, and I opened the box, and I was absolutely astounded when I saw it, and I was dumbfounded. And if there was anybody around at the time, I would have been speechless. It is amazing in just about every aspect. The entire thing is made of metal. It weighs 83 pounds?
38 pounds according to the shipping box.
38 pounds, which is quite, it's massive. It's huge. It's overwhelming when you see it. These doors open up. They're thin pieces of metal when they open up. And you see this massive number of red against the black. It's just a great look when you open it up. But it's not just that. It doesn't stop there. This interior piece where the tubes are is actually embossed with the name Spectre that goes all the way across. These are. I can't. The second I saw it, I was like, I can't imagine anything taking its place this year. If Habanos had come out with something like this, I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it cost just an absolute buttload of money, I'm sure. And it's really, really amazing. And if you can, I would suggest looking at it in person, seeing it in person. What's really impressive me, and from what I was told last night, Cohiba's the Spectre has won 3 of the 4 last packaging number ones, or tied, and Cohiba brand has won
4th year
in a row. Right. So I mean, it's not like this is an unusual thing for Cohiba to win in terms of the packaging awards, but they are learning as they go along. One of the things I had a major problem with in some of the past versions was the tubes, which had come undone on some of them. I believe it was the second one. You actually open up the box and some of them had come loose. These actually screw in as opposed to stopper or something of that nature. It's like a Terminator. They learn as they go along, and it's really very, very well put together. And it just shocks the senses when you see it for the first time and feel it for the first time. It is the heaviest thing I've ever picked up with cigars in it, in the studio.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's nuts. It's the metal, like, to do an all metal. I mean, not every single piece here. Obviously, those tubes are plastic, so it's not 100% metal. Thank God. The cigars are tobacco, hopefully. But the amount of metal work that's done, the fact that there's piano hinges down the side because of how heavy those doors are. It's nuts. And General has thought, as Brooks was using a Terminator analogy, maybe like a human. They've also evolved a little bit, and so this release came with a pair of black gloves, so that way you don't put your fingerprints all over the metal exterior, because I imagine it would be very obvious on that brushed metal. The other thing I'll say about them evolving is the first 2 releases, so you can kind of see there. The second one's, the lighting on this is not great because of just how much is going on there. But the first 2 releases were excellent. They won the packaging awards the years they were released in 2018 and 19. The 18 is on the left and the 19 is on the right. The 18 was super unique. That lid goes off and there's a mounting point. You can go back and check the review or the packaging awards from there if you want to see more of these pictures. But it was a little flimsy. It was sturdy, but the interior parts weren't, like, you could take the entire thing out. It wasn't glued down very well. The 19 box was super interesting because of just how many elements, sort of similar to what I referred to that Espinosa box earlier, where, to get the cigars out, there was a lot of moving parts involved. And it was another super unique way of displaying cigars. In this release, it's metal. There's no concern about the sturdiness. If anything, it's completely overdone. It's a $1,200 box, so $120 per cigar. And like Brooks said, it's absolutely massive. Patrick, yesterday you brought up a point, which is like, what are you supposed to do with this box when you're done with it? Because of how large it is and how heavy it is. I wouldn't. We took the cigars out. even though we have a lot of cabinet humidors, I suspect that's what most people will do, unless you have some sort of walk-in, because it's very, very large. But, I think, General's clearly put the time in, the resources in to make this, a flagship product, a Halo product, although not the most expensive non-Cuban Cohiba to come out this year. They have a $2,500 package called the Cohiba C8, which none of us saw in person, so it didn't get considered for this list. But it's very clear that they're putting in the time. I don't know if N Solo Design was involved with this one, but if they were, congrats to Nick and his team again. Patrick, any lasting thoughts here with the Spectre that you're doing the review of, I believe, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, I think the thing that has become more and more apparent in recent years is that you've seen a real push at the top end of the spectrum for a couple of brands. You've obviously seen it with Habanos Aseada, really focusing on some luxurious releases that command premium pricing. And it wasn't that long ago, correct me if I'm wrong, that we saw things like the Cohiba Blue, which was a value-oriented Cohiba. And I don't remember there being a press release or an announcement about this, but certainly, and if this is Sean Williams's push, congratulations to him. But to really take the Cohiba brand and General's Cohiba brand and push the upper limit of the price spectrum, and we've seen that a lot. And I think there's some stratification in that regard, where if you can deliver a well thought out, unique, distinctive, limited product, you can find buyers for it and really create some impressive work. And there's an audience out there for it. And I think that's what's been really impressive with Cohiba in the last couple of years, is that they seem to stop the thought of, let's make Cohiba accessible to everybody, although I think you would argue it still is. It's still very ubiquitous in humidors. But let's push the other end of the spectrum and really get into that higher end limited release segment. And that's we've been seeing in the last couple of years with Cohiba.
There's no question to me. General has always looked at Cohibas, from what I understand, as their flagship brand. But products like this and doing it consistently make that crystal clear as to what the premium brand is within their massive portfolio. You contrast that with Altadis USA, who I think is sort of looked at as their main competitor. They're the people behind the non-Cuban Romeo y Julieta, Monte Cristo, H. Upmann, etc. And it's Monte Cristo is supposed to be that brand, but it's not. They had a $5,000 LE Blue Humidor or $10,000 release not too long ago, but it's not as clear because of the consistency that the General's really taken with the Cohiba brand, and really tried to market it with these Halo and flagship products. Brooks, any lasting thoughts on the list?
Yeah, I mean, still talking about the Cohiba. Let's not forget also that the cigars haven't been bad either. The ones I've smoked have been actually very, very good. It's not just the packaging. They're putting thought into blends. They're putting thought into the entire product. And I haven't tried the C8. I would love to try the C8. But the M that I tried as well, though the packaging didn't do much for me, the M was very, very good in terms of cigar. And the Spectre, one of the Spectres, if I recall correctly, got under the top 25.
Yeah, I believe the
2019 maybe
the 2019 one, the one that tasted slightly flavored.
Right.
Had a slightly sweet tip.
They it's not just the packaging, although I'm sure that would be enough for some people, but the cigars inside are also
they have to back it up,
quite good.
Yeah. So that is the top 10 of the packaging of 2021. I would also like to thank Brian Burt. He is the fourth voter here. He used to do reviews for us, but does no longer does the weekly reviews for us, but does help us out with numerous projects, including our awards week stuff, and certainly helped out here. And obviously, I'd like to thank Patrick and Brooks for their time and efforts here as well. We will be back here tomorrow for the top 25, the thing that you probably actually want to see. We'll be back on the same places, so if you're watching this, just tune back into wherever you're at, and we will do more or less the same thing, only 25 cigars, and hopefully with fewer technical issues than the one that we experienced this morning. But thank you guys for stopping by. Congrats to all of the winners, and we will see you tomorrow.